Today I'm going to make the last briefs for this set, which are also my favorite, and I'd like to talk through the motives of why we actually wear clothes. I don't know about you, but high-waisted anything makes me feel kind of dressed up and sophisticated, and since we are talking about underwear here, they are, in my opinion, also the most erotic ones, probably because I'm into vintage fashion and all those pin-up girls always wear high-waisted stuff. So in fashion theory, the dress motifs are usually split into 4 categories: protection, utility, modesty, adornment and seduction. George Sproul's differentiates further motives in his book Consumer Behavior Towards Dress, which I find interesting. They are social differentiation, social belonging, self-enhancement and modernism. I would like to break them down for you while making these briefs. The first motive is utility or protection that clothes provide. They fulfill practical and protective functions. Clothing is often chosen according to criteria such as comfort, durability or ease of care. Now, sportswear has dominated the fashion for quite some time now, a fashion which symbolizes health and youthful vitality. In regards to briefs specifically, it is an interesting motive since women have survived without them for a very long period of fashion history. But since our modern clothes are quite tight-fitting in comparison, a layer to cover certain areas is needed, and this is how we ended up with panties eventually. The pattern for these is based on the one I made for the bias cut briefs last week. They are also cut on bias here, so there won't be any lines showing, but because they are narrow here at the waist, we need a bit more stretch. This is why I added some side pieces here, which are also cut on bias for elasticity. Basically so you can get them over your hips, but so they are still snug on your waist. As for modesty, the society defines its interpretation, which varies with custom, religion and culture. The naked body needs to be covered, however it is a societal norm in Western culture to walk barefoot and with bare arms nowadays, at least in summer. And underwear as a layer between the clothes and the body is a demonstration of modesty. Now, I cannot guarantee that this pattern will work for someone with a very pronounced hip-to-waist ratio. You might then want to add some type of closure in the back here, or make the side parts out of a material that is actually stretchy. But for reference, my hip-to-waist difference is 28 centimeters, and it worked very well. I also want to show you how to make one with a closure in the back though, for a different set I plan to make in the future. As for the other pieces, in this set I made a PDF with instructions on how to construct this pattern for your own measurements. Keep in mind though that this one actually builds on the previous pattern. You basically trace it over and construct it to go higher up to the waist, and I won't lie to you, this one might be a bit tricky for pattern beginners, but it always looks much more intimidating than it actually is. I'm adding 1 centimeter seam allowance to all the parts. I feel like I already touched on adornment a bit in my previous video. This is mainly understood as an adjustment to the prevailing ideal of beauty. Adornment can emphasize physical charms, manifest creativity, individuality, social rank and cultural affiliation, whereby it sometimes violates the rules of comfort, mobility and health. I'm cutting out the back pieces twice and mark the middle. I'm cutting out the side pieces twice and mark the side which is going to be connected to the front piece. I'm cutting out the front piece which I connected to the gusset on bias and mark this line as well as the middle. And now the gusset lining out of linen again, using the weave edge to my advantage. It would be coy of me not to state the obvious that underwear can carry the motive of seduction. After all, it is the layer closest to the skin. However, I feel like there's not much to say other than my observation that there has been a change recently as to what we actually consider sexually attractive. It has become a very public and a private topic at the same time. Public because the discussion around all the varieties of what can actually be seductive to some and not others has become much more open. And private because we start to understand that our own tastes and kinks are a very personal cocktail of our own psyche. So I'd say the seduction motive doesn't necessarily mean that you're trying to seduce someone because ultimately you'd feel sexy in something that you feel at ease in, that is reacting to your own idea of eroticism, so in a way you're seducing yourself. I will now connect the side pieces to the front piece with a French seam. I first sew them together on the right side, then press the seam, turn it and sew again on the wrong sides. I secure the seam allowance with a stitch close to the edge, which I think also looks very decorative. Clothing doesn't have to be uniform so that certain characteristics can be used to determine who belongs to which group in the broadest sense, which is why clothes can express social belonging. Social differentiation, on the other hand, expresses how clothing distinguishes the wearer from the crowd. Apparel then serves as a sign of professional status, religious affiliation, social status, or lifestyle. Designer labels and expensive materials, for example, initially symbolize high social status but fade in their statement as soon as they trickle down. Now we can proceed in the exact same way as with the Brazilian cut briefs. I secure the gusset lining with a few stitches so it will be easier to handle. I measure the elastic for my leg cutout at 6 centimeters and cut it in 2 pieces. I am sewing on the elastic with a zigzag stitch on the right sides with the picot edge pointing upwards. I now turn the elastic over and sew again while pulling on it and pushing the fabric to the left. Self-enhancement implicates that despite social group pressure, people strive to maintain and assert their personal identity through makeup, hairstyle, and accessories. The front piece is finished for now. I am sewing the back pieces simply together. Make sure to not sew over the seam allowance here. Then I turn it inside out and secure the seam allowance with a stitch close to that edge. This can be a bit tricky actually, just sew slowly and steadily. Modernism and fashion basically means an expression of modernity. Clothes are used to convey the impression that one is familiar with the latest styles and informed about current topics, which is useful since the right outfit can give us access to the right places and people. It becomes an indicator for creativity, flexibility, and an orientation towards future. I'm going to combine the front and the back piece, kind of sandwiching the gusset in between the opening here and sewing it together at the seam allowance. I am hugging the sides with the back pieces by turning those inside out. Since these are 3 layers, I am securing them with a few stitches and sew together at the seam allowance. I am adding a mainly decorative stitch near the seam. Now I am going to add the elastic for the waist, which I measure on myself. I pull it tight, but not too tight, so it's still comfortable. I mark it in half so that the marking meets the center of the front piece. I sew the elastic starting at the back seam and sewing it on the right side as before, while evenly stretching it out. Now I turn it over again and secure with another zigzag stitch. It is almost finished, but since I like wearing stockings, I am also going to add loops for detachable garters. I will make a garter belt for this set later with detachable garters, but it never feels right to wear a garter belt with high-waisted briefs, so I am going to add some loops here to be able to put the detachable garters inside. I simply fold a small piece of elastic and attach it with a narrow zigzag stitch. This is what it looks like finished. As you can see, it is quite wrinkly to our modern eyes at least, but this is a sacrifice of using a non-stretchy material, I guess. And with these 3 types of briefs, this set is pretty much covered, and I am going to make a bra in my next video. Bye!